what a wonderful thing is the sun and the nice weather. And I love it when it's beautiful out, except when I'm on a book tour and then I want it to rain and be miserable and be cold. And it really should be, because it's April and we're in New England. And it's always raining here. And then I also know that when you have a beautiful day in New England, in the beginning of the spring, or spring's not quite here yet, we've also just had 6 months of miserable winter. So with just a little bit more about just myself. I grew up in Cambodia and was born in Cambodia in 1970, and from that year to 1979, I grew up in Cambodia. I was born into a family of just 3 brothers, 3 sisters, and my father, who was a military officer, and that meant a lifestyle privilege for us. And we lived in a big house in the city with a washing machine and indoor toilets and high teak chairs and televisions and movie theaters across the street. And my brothers were always listening to Elvis Presley music on their 8-track tapes and wearing their bell-bottom pants. My sister and I fought like monkeys. My father threatened to replace us with monkeys. So we really lived a fairly normal life. And I share that because sometimes when I go to school and I talk to students about Cambodia, they have this image of it all being villages and ruralness. And it wasn't so. My Cambodia was beautiful. And the countryside was beautiful. And my life was beautiful. And the Khmer Rouge came in and ended all of that. And my innocent childhood came to a crashing, abrupt end. And yet, you know, I know now that the conflict and the war in Southeast Asia, the Third Indochina War, was already raging by the time I came into the world. I didn't know about it. My parents kept me so sheltered from it, like many other good parents would. So when the war came into my home and into my street with their guns and their grenades and the communists and the genocide, it was all a complete surprise to me. And so that was my pitch for the first book, which is called First They Killed My Father, and it's surprisingly enough, it exceeded my goal of selling 10 copies. It's done more than that, and it's also now out in 10 different languages and in 12 different countries. So it's been so wonderful. I'm so blessed and grateful that it's being supported. The first book, I like to describe it as a book about surviving wars, of what it took to survive wars, what it took as a community, as people, and for parents. My parents, my mother and father, they sacrificed so much for me to be here, to be alive, to be breathing. My father's chances of surviving the Khmer Rouge would have been so much better had it not been for the 7 kids that was following him around. But he didn't leave us. He stayed with us. And eventually the Khmer Rouge came and caught up with him. From 1975 to 1979, the communist Khmer Rouge ruled Cambodia. At the end of that regime, they left an estimate of 2 million Cambodians. Dead out of 7 million Cambodians. Today, I mean, I've done this so many times, and it just hit me. It's the 30th anniversary of the Khmer Rouge takeover, and it's my birthday. I'm actually 25 for the 10th time in a row, again. And I have good genes, so except that it's now on TV, but I'm going to have to get rid of those people. But I am 25 again this year. And it's just always really hard. So the first book is about surviving wars, and if I get emotional, you're just going to have to deal with it. Because if that's all you have to deal with, then you're too lucky, and you're too blessed, so it's not going to hurt anybody. The first book is about surviving wars, and I wrote the second book to share more with people about what it took to survive the peace. And I really wanted to publish it because since 9/11, I think the biggest phrase and the biggest, the words that sticks in my mind the most when I watch news and read articles are the phrase that the war is over. It's over, it's ended, it's over in Iraq, it's over in Afghanistan, it's over in Bosnia, it's over in Kosovo, it's over in Rwanda, and it's either ending or over in so many of these countries. For people who've gone through it, it's not over. Whether you live in America or whether you live still in these war-torn countries. And it's not over for Americans, many of whom are there fighting, many of whom have sons and daughters there protecting others. For those who've gone through it, it's not over. So if the first book could be said to be about a book about surviving wars, this one's about surviving peace and what it took. For my experience, surviving peace was the weather when I first came to America. I would just read a section. Again, I arrived in Vermont after being in Cambodia, where at the refugee camps, the mission workers would try to tell us what America was going to be like by showing us movies of America. If you travel at all, you know that movies that makes its way to Southeast Asia are usually big budget movies. And the story usually take place in states like San Francisco or maybe Boston, maybe in LA, New York, but most definitely not Vermont. And so I remember watching on the screen and was asking if where we're going is like that. And they said, oh, my brother, has never been to America, said, oh, it's America, so it must be like LA. It wasn't. There are more cows, blackened cows than people. And I have to say that Vermont's the whitest state in America. For more diversity, I moved to Maine, the second whitest state in America. And then I went to DC after that. But one of my big shock when I first came to America, outside the language and the culture, is the fact that it was so cold. We came and arrived on June 10th, and we were freezing. We were told that it was going to get colder. There are no words in the English language to describe what you guys go through every winter. It's not a cold, it's a chill to the bones, and that's not even sufficient. So this is my first experience with winter. And outside of the cold, I was also told another really wonderful thing by friends, and that when it snows sometimes outside, kids don't have to go to school. That was even better. As October turns to November, the sky grows dark early and early in the day, and the sun travels shorter and shorter paths across the horizon. Soon the crisp air turns cold and blows with force across the barren land, but no leaves are left to protest its stinging wind. In Essex Junction, with fall newly departed, winter moves in speedily until we all wake up one morning to find a layer of white stuff on the ground. Snow! Snow! I scream excitedly, my palms pressed against the cold window. Snow! Stop screaming, I know already. My sister-in-law Loung is now pregnant and no longer working, so she's at home with me. As my breath steams up the window pane, images resurface of snow cone vendors grinding up ice blocks in Cambodia. In my mind, shaved ice falls from the skies as I gather them into balls and pour orange syrup on them. I'll sell snow cones and make money to send to Cambodia, I thought. And then a happier thought entered my mind. Mrs. McNulty said kids often don't have to go to school when it snows here. No school today! I run into the kitchen to tell Ian, my sister. Yes, school today, she replies, waddling her way to the living room with my snow clothes. I sigh and complain how she doesn't believe me. I stomp back into the bathroom, my arms and legs swinging like elephant trunks. As I go about my toiletry, Ian tosses an armload of winter gear on my bed. What follows is a lengthy bundling procedures where I get pushed, pulled, and stuffed into various outfits and items. When I finally totter out the door, I am wearing shiny blue snow pants over my long johns and jeans, 2 pairs of socks, my red winter jacket, orange hat, black mittens, and of course, my scarlet moon boots. Once outside, I immediately dump my school bags on the ground and flatten my body on the step and flatten my body on the ground. Snow, snow, I scream, pressing my stomach on the frozen grass. With difficulty, I roll over my back and stare at the white, empty sky as my nostrils blow out white, cold smoke like a dragon. Underneath me, the snow crunches like little crystals under my weight. Snow, snow, I yell with elation, my arms flapping to make my very first snow angel. No. Frost. Frost. A neighbor girl replies, wearing only a light coat, scarf, and sneakers. And then snow came, and everything froze, and didn't thaw again for 7 months. I was in Vermont. While I was living and adapting and adjusting to life in America, my sister and other siblings who I left behind were trying to survive a very difficult life in Cambodia. And this second book is written in alternating chapters, with one following me and my life in America, and the other following my sister and her life in Cambodia, where she lived with my aunt and uncles. Just a little bit. I've got a hair or something in my eye, so I'm just doing this with a little bit. Just right after the Khmer Rouge regime. I started before the Khmer Rouge regime. I started with a family of 9, 7 siblings, and both my parents. After the war, among the 2 million victims, also took the lives of both my parents, 2 sisters, and 20 other relatives. Right after it, the 5 siblings were able to reunite, and we knew we had to find a way to get out of the country in search of a better life. And there were 2 ways out of Cambodia then. Either walk the land, go to Thailand, where we knew we would have to cross the minefields. But we didn't want to risk the lives of any more siblings. Or else you try to buy your seat on boats, smuggling boats that would take you from Cambodia to Vietnam, Vietnam to Thailand, where there were refugee camps. We decided to take the safer route of the boat smuggling operations. And we were able to, however, only raise enough gold to take 3 people out. It was decided that my oldest brother, who was 21, his wife, who was 22, and they had to pick 1 sibling of 4 to take with them. My sister and I were the best of friends. We were kindred spirits. We were playmates before the war. And during the war, when my father was killed, it was to her that I cried too. When my sister died from starvation, it was to her, with her, that I raged and screamed and hate. And so when we were separated, it broke my heart. While I was in America, she struggled in Cambodia. And trying to, living in a village where there's no electricity, no running water, and she's still in the same village. There's still no electricity and no running water. While I was able to buy food with food stamps from public assistance, she had to go and try to grow her own food on land that were littered with landmines. And this is her story, told in her voice, in her chapter, about losing, how she lost friends to landmines. Her name is Chou. Chou stops to look at the eggs, and she went to the market to get some supplies for the family. Chou stops to look at the eggs she is selling, and by chance glances up to see a friend's husband approaching the village on a trail she has traveled many times before. From a short distance, Chou sees him pick up what looks to be a round green disc the size of a small cup. In the instant it takes for Chou to blink, the mine explodes and knocks the man to the ground. As if in slow motion, Chou feels the blast in her ribs and weaken her knees. Throughout the market, villager gasps and stop in horror. In the distant fields, a cow moos and dogs bark in protest. In the rising dust cloud, the man holds his bloody hands in front of him and pushes himself off the ground with his elbows. He manages to get to his feet and run toward the village. As he nears, Chou sees that his face is dripping with blood and is all scratched up, as if he'd just lost a fierce cockfight. On his jet black hair are bits of twigs, grass, flesh, and skin that shakes loose as he staggers forward. In front of his chest, his hands, where his hands once were, are two shredded stumps that look as if they've been in a grinder, skin flailing, nails pulled off, knuckles and bones crushed, sticking for all to see. As the man runs into the market, Chou sees only the whites of his eyes, and then he begins to lick, bite, and gnaw at his bones as the blood spurts out, soaking his shirt and pants. The villagers move out of his way, covering their mouths, many gagging, some dry heaving in response. Chou watches wide-eyed but feels herself numbling and closing off. In the middle of the crowd, the man stops. His face is eerily calm as he raises his mutilated hand to his eyes with a look of detached recognition. While his body staggers and sways like a drunk, his pupil rolled back. The villagers watch in silence as if paying respect while he goes through his last wind of life. And when my sister was telling me this, she was crying. And when she was watching this, she wasn't crying. And it really took 20 years for her to feel the man's pain, because when she was there at that moment, she didn't have the luxury to do it. And it's because of that that I wanted to not just tell her story in my voice, but to tell her story in her voice, to be as honest as I could. After having written 2 memoirs, I've come to realize that the genre of memoirs is a pretty hot thing right now. But many of the books are written by authors from the West, who either speak French or English or Spanish, but most likely English. And if you happen to be a Cambodian with stories that you want to tell, you can't speak English, and you're illiterate in Cambodian and English and in all the languages, then you don't get to tell your story. And I didn't think that was fair. My sister cannot read my book. She can't read. When I was getting an education, she was busy trying to survive the war. I'm proud to say that to this day she has 5 kids. She was eventually arranged in a marriage at 18. Gave birth to 5 kids in a village. Again, no running water, no electricity, never seen prenatal care, prenatal doctors. Gave birth to all the kids in thatched roofs. And yet today she's sending all her kids to school. In the village, there are no high schools because education ends, they only have it, school ends at grade 8. And in order for the kids to go and get a high school degree, parents have to pay a lot. And they also have to allow their children to leave the village. My niece, who's actually 23, my brother's oldest daughter, is beginning her junior year of high school at age 23. After the war, in addition to the poverty and the desperation, they were living in villages, isolated and far away from the city. And even though there were schools in the city, my brothers and sisters didn't want to let their kids go. Their fear was, haven't seen family members who were separated when the Khmer Rouge came in, that what if something happened again? and their kids are in a different location and they wouldn't get to see them. It wasn't until just the last 2 years that they let their kids go. And that, I think it's because they're now able to see a longer future than the future, than just the ones involving the Khmer Rouge and surviving the Khmer Rouge. I'm just going to read one more section and then take questions. This is, again, it is today, it's the 30th anniversary of the Khmer Rouge takeover. And I'm going to have to be able to say that without getting all sad about it. But I'm not able to, so it's back to my therapist's office I go after this. Oh man, I think I was doing so good, and it was costing $120 an hour. Thank God, hopefully you guys will support this, because I need money for therapy after this. It's, after many years of going back and forth, I've been back to Cambodia over 25 times now. And really, my home is in America, but my heart and soul continues to be in Cambodia, where my families are, and my father's and mother's spirits. My biggest fear, one of my biggest fears when I first came to America, in addition to just it being a new country, a new experience, was whether or not my parents' spirits could cross the ocean to find me. Whether or not my parents, in the Khmer, in the Khmer belief, the ocean, the spirits could have a hard time crossing the ocean, and especially at vast distances and spaces. But they have visited me a lot, and they come in forms of dreams and really nice people that I've met. And leading up to this dream, for years, I talked to my mother a lot. And I used to think that when I tell people that, they were going to put me in a hospital and wrap a straitjacket around me. And then Hillary Clinton says she talks to Eleanor Roosevelt. So, and I'm really grateful for that. And I just want to share one dream with you. I remember I was visiting my brother in Vermont. I was living in Maine, and I was driving home one night. And it occasionally does when emotion just hits me. And I was very sad, and and the trigger for this was, as I was driving away, I looked at the rear view mirror, and I saw my brothers and sister, and in-law, and the kids watching me driving away. And that just broke my heart. And so I cried for 4 hours, and was talking to my mother, and I said, I need help. I need you to show me that, one, I'm not alone, and that your angels are looking out for me. And I need you to show me people who've gone through tragedies and are not just surviving but thriving. I need you to show me Holocaust survivors. And that was before I realized that Cambodians, through our experience, could be survivors as well. I didn't give myself any values for that. And when I arrived home, I opened my mailbox, and there was a catalog on angels. It wasn't to my address, and it was just, one of those, you buy angel plates for $24.99, but still, it was a catalog on angels. So I thought, wow, that is really cool. Thank you. And then I went home and I turned on TV, and Miss Oprah Winfrey was doing a show on Holocaust survivors. And at the moment, there was a story about this woman who met her husband when he rescued her at the concentration camp. They ended up living in America with kids, and they're happy and healthy. And so my head was going, no. And then ever since then, I have a hard time getting naked. You just don't know who's watching. And my mother's visited me quite a few other times in dreams, and this is my favorite and is the one that's touched my heart the most. December 2003, the dogs barked loudly outside the wooden door and wake me from a wonderful dream. With my eyes still closed, I relived the dream scene by scene to etch the details forever into my memory. In it, I'm trekking among the ruins of Bante Saray, the beautiful and exquisitely preserved rose-colored sandstone temple of women built in the 10th century in Siem Reap. As I touch the cool, rough carvings and stare at the apsaras, nagas, elephants, and myriads of gods and monsters living in the stones, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn to see Ma smiling at me. She's alive and beautiful and basks in a soft twilight that makes her look golden and angelic. "What are you doing here?" I ask her. "Just walking with you," she replies, as if this is the most natural thing for her to do. I don't ask her any more questions and wait for her to catch up. As we trek along the 1,000-year-old temple steps, neither of us speaks a word. The first time in my life I am with her unencumbered by the feeling of loss, terror, horror, or sadness. It is as if we are living out a parallel life where the war never existed between us. When I open my eyes, that feeling of peace and serenity is still with me. I'm lying on a spring mattress on top of Chou's plank bed in Chou's room in the village. Through the slits in the wooden windows, there's still only darkness. Inside my mosquito net, the air is cool and fresh. When I hear Chou's footsteps shuffling in the other room, it dawns on me that she and I are living out our parallel lives in this world as well. Since our first reunion in 1995, we've been forming a new sister bond in a world that does not include the genocide or the Khmer Rouge. I'll leave it at that and take questions. Thank you. It was, and I hold on to that dream a lot, because since I was 5, well, for as long as I can remember, I have not been able to think about my mother without, or just to know what it's like. And I will talk to my friends, and then if this is a sure thing to make them cry and buy me food and pay for it. And I'll go up to my girlfriends with their mom and I'll say, what is it like? What is it like to have a mom? What is it like to have a dad? What is it like to grow up with your sisters? And then they take me out and buy my beer. But I have never ever had the experience of being with my mother without the soldiers. But in that dream, it was so vivid. It was so clear. I knew somewhere there that the Khmer Rouge was in our history. But as we were walking along, we were in a world where it didn't have feelings. And it was the most wonderful gift. And I can still remember this feeling. And tonight when I have a hard time, it's going to be what I'm going to hold on to. That she and I were able to, for that moment, be together without the Khmer Rouge being in our lives. I'll take questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I know that our country, the U.S., has played a pretty important role in some of Cambodia's modern history. We play an important role in modern history of Cambodia, and not always a good role. And I'm wondering what your friends in Cambodia think about the U.S.
Yeah. There's a real distinction between the U.S. and U.S. citizens, between U.S. governmental policies and Americans. My friends, for the most part, my Cambodian families, they love Americans. They love American people, and they love the independence. They love sort of the individuality and the fire and the spirits that the Americans they've seen on TV and that the people they met through me possessed. With that said, they're incensed over what's going on. After 7 years, and to back it up, many scholars, and I'm not a scholar, but I've done enough reading, and I do believe that the Khmer Rouge would not have come to power without the U.S.-Vietnam War crossing into Cambodia. When the U.S. was going to Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge was this ragtag band of 4,000, 5,000 Khmer Rouge soldiers with no arms, no guns, no supply. And then the secret bombings went in and gave them the perfect propaganda to recruit soldiers when they destroyed the Khmer's livelihoods. And then, of course, the whole thing with the CIA supporting a coup to oust Sihanouk in 1970 and put in place Loung Ung, his general, who then invited the U.S. into Cambodia into a full-fledged war there. Long history past, but you know, there's a lot more to that. Current history, since 1997, that when Cambodian government first approached the United Nations to ask for assistance to set up a tribunal to try the Khmer Rouge leaders for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, it took 8 years for various different parties to come upon and to agree on a framework for the tribunal. That's been established. The United Nations said the Cambodian government had to raise the $43 million, 50% of the money needed to run the 3-year tribunal process. On March 24th, at a donor conference, they were able to raise $38.3 million. They are less than $5 million short to start the work to set up the tribunal. Japan came in at $20 million. Australia, France, England, U.S. came in at 0. U.S. does have, just said that they have supported programs. There's a program called the Cambodian Documentation Center, ran by a really good friend of mine, Yok Chang, and which gets a little bit of money from the U.S. And I think we got something like $250,000 last year. And with his staff of 35 people, he's collected over 800,000 pieces, or maybe it was 600,000 anywhere, but as many 100,000 pieces of documentations to support the Khmer Rouge trial. The U.S. said that that's all they're going to do, and they came in at 0. After 26 years of waiting for some kind of justice, we are yet again delayed because the U.S. refused to get involved. Outside of the financial aspect, we also need the U.S. involvement to provide credibility. How do we go to other countries to raise more money when the world's biggest leader refused to support the process?
I teach English as a second language, and I have a Cambodian student, pretty new to the class, who in conversation said that he'd been a Cambodian soldier for 25 years. And when he said that, I was curious about his background because I'm not that familiar with the history. I'm embarrassed to say the dates and who was doing what when, but I think he's recently come to this country, and so if he left the Army when, a year ago, or if he came here a year ago from the Army, it would have been around 1980, I guess, that he was in the Army. What does that mean to be, I'm curious, I didn't ask him directly, I didn't want to right at that moment, but what does it mean to be a Cambodian soldier now? You said you were from a military family?
Yeah, my father was a high-ranking military officer. We also were entrepreneurs with businesses here and there. It means very different things for different people, and I think even to Americans. So I don't know what it means for him. Factually, if he left in 1980, if during during the Khmer Rouge.
No, he's only 44 years old.
Okay.
So he would have been a soldier from 1980 forward, probably, or before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
After the war.
Yeah. It really depends where he was and where he was geographically, where he was in the country. He was. They're soldiers for. He could be a former Khmer Rouge soldier because they didn't disband until 1998. Depends on where he was coming from. Or it could be. He could be a Cambodian governmental soldier. So it really depends on where he came, where he's from, and what geographic, which provinces. That tells a lot more.
Thank you.
There was also talks of your book, your first book being translated in Khmer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that actually.
Yeah, it did. Through, I was able to raise the funds and to translate the book into Cambodian, and it's now used in quite a few schools and universities in Cambodia. Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge is not part of the education curriculum, and it's only included, I think, it hasn't changed since last year, but for grade 12 students. And you got 68% of Cambodian, you got something like 70% of Cambodians are illiterate and do not make it to grade 12. So there's not a lot of education on it. When students tell their teachers or goes to their administrators saying that they want to learn about the Khmer Rouge, and it's been written in the press, and they tell them to go and visit the Genocide Museum. And that's not the full story. My book has also been, I donate rights to the documentation center so they can do whatever they want and with it. They did an audio version of it which played in Cambodia on 2 national radio for 3 months every day. And then they also serialized it in newspapers for 3 months every day as well, the whole entire book. This book has been translated into Cambodian as well, and it's going to come out pretty soon, as soon as they get it done. It's translated, but you have to then make it into a book form.
Loung, in your wonderful new book, you talk a lot about the value of writing to you when you were an adolescent having difficult times, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why, as an adult, you decided to become a writer and share your story.
Yeah. It's English is my 4th language, and as you can tell, writing is easier than speaking for me. So now, as I'm sitting here, and yesterday I was in Essex Junction, and I was giving a talk at my high school, and of course all my teachers showed up, and in the front row were all my English teachers. So I'm sitting here and going, oh my God, I forgot to put an S there, and really my tenses were wrong, and it was the most difficult experience. But as a child, I did it because it was therapeutic. When I was growing up in Essex Junction, and I tried to suppress the war a lot. When I went through puberty, and this is in the 80s, people told you and taught me in class that there would be physical changes, but they didn't talk about the chemical changes. At least not in a way that would make sense to me. They didn't talk about how my mind was going to go crazy and how the war was going to come back out to me, up, and I couldn't control it. And they didn't tell me why all my dreams were coming back and haunting me. People wanting me dead. Looking back now, I realize the only time I've seen that much blood coming out of a human body was either 1, they're on the streets dying, or 2, they're on another street dead. And so I had a real fear that I was not going to live through it. And I became very depressed, and I didn't know if I wanted to live. And I went to see my school counselor. Now in America, you can go find a therapist and a counselor for alcohol issues, domestic violence, assertiveness, divorce, depression, whether you're colorblind or socially challenged. You can find a therapist for many of these areas, but it's very difficult to find a therapist who knows about Cambodia and who knows about war traumas. And so I always felt as if I was giving a lot of information and being the teacher, and I started writing just to let out the toxic out of my body. As an adult, I continue to write and publish because I just don't want the bastards to win. And it's just as simple as that. They try to silence me once, And many times in my mind after the war, they try to silence me. And I've just gotten to the point where I'm just not going to let me silence me. I don't want them to win. This is my fight. This is my rebellion against the Khmer Rouge. They've silenced so many people. They've silenced over 2 million Cambodians. They're just not going to succeed with this girl. Yes, ma'am.
Has your sister ever come to the United States, or do you have any plans to have her come?
Yeah, she has never been. And at first, she was not able to come because from 1979 to 1993, approximately 1993, 92, Cambodia and the U.S. did not have diplomatic relations. For people like me, it meant we couldn't write, we couldn't visit, we couldn't call, we couldn't contact them. Cambodia was listed on the back of your passport, if you had a passport during that period, along with Cuba as one of the countries to be boycotted. And when the country opened again, then it was the worst economic crisis, the Asian economic crisis, and then the worst flood they had in 75 years, and then it was 9/11, and then it was SARS, and so it's been very difficult, and it's small children that she gave birth to, now we're looking to have her visit later this year, early next year. But it was also very, very hard, I think, for me and for my brother. We didn't try to do that sooner. We're very, very careful on what we introduce my siblings to. I mean, I think it's absolutely cruel to give them things they couldn't get for themselves. And I work for the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation, and we have a program we call the Cambodia Fund that supports projects, centers in Cambodia where we manufacture prosthetic limbs, arms, legs, wheelchairs, and other mobility devices for victims of landmines. We've been told that our funding is going to be cut by 25% for the next couple of years until we're going to receive zero by 2007. I think it is so cruel to go in there for 15 years and put legs and arms and give people hope, and then close down programs. And when they come back, we couldn't be there. So we're working very hard to make sure that we provide sustainability and help. And development work has to be done with a thought toward providing sustainable help as well.
I'm very excited to read your book. Thank you.